Welcome to the Multifamily Innovation Podcast, where we bring you the latest insights and strategies to help you succeed in the multifamily real estate industry. Listen, if you haven't registered already, get your ticket to the upcoming Multifamily Innovation Summit. Go to multifamilyinnovation.com to get registered. Now, today I'm thrilled to be sitting here with Briant Carcamo. He's the Co-CEO of Vizibly and a seasoned real estate professional with an impressive track record in revenue management, budgeting, and business intelligence. He's been doing this at some of the largest multifamily property management firms, including Steadfast and Greystar. Brian is here with us today to share his invaluable experience and expertise, providing actionable tips and tricks to help you stay ahead of the curve in this dynamic industry. Brian, welcome in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. I know you've been flying around. You've been to California. You just got back from a ski trip at an awesome event. And here you are in the studio with us. Listen, as I read your opening, I think about this collision that's happening with technology right now, where innovators like yourself are getting together with Silicon Valley, taking deep expertise within the industry, where you're fundamentally underwriting deals, having an inside look at what it takes to move these deals forward, and bring a solution to the industry. So take me through what that's been like, and a little bit about what you're working on.
Yeah, great question. We've been talking to all kinds of, owners, operators, right? Multifamily professionals, both big and small. And it's been just a really great experience getting to learn about what they're really focused on, when it comes to scaling, managing, a multifamily property company, in today's just changing market environment. The things that we help with are with budgeting, forecasting, operational reporting. And I think what we're really finding is just a big disconnect, between, how you go and create financial plans and budgets, and then what it actually takes to go and execute on them. I think we've seen, just like in the past couple of months, how much the market has changed, just even where we were, even I think just last September, today we've got rising interest rates, right? Decreasing rents, and, everyone's trying to figure out, what's going to be the technology stack that really helps them manage the properties better in the future.
Yeah, you're getting people out of Excel.
We're trying to. Yeah, it's just so challenging, to manage that today, and when I was running budgets, at Steadfast, I spent so much time, working in financial models, trying to get all this data out of the property management systems, and, we're trying to provide a better solution for folks today.
Yeah, how are those conversations going? I mean, obviously, anybody in the business understands the intensity around, they even call it a season, right? A budget season, and all that data coming together in a very, what feels like a great opportunity for companies that are focused on productivity, efficiency, and creating that experience for employees. I don't believe most people really wake up thinking like, oh, I can't wait to do this process. You're making it easier for them. How are these conversations going?
Yeah, I think we're seeing just, multifamily folks, they're really thinking about how they optimize their time, both at, the corporate office, what folks are actually engaged in, what things are going to move the ball forward. And then also, how do we get the teams to go and execute on those plans? I think just because of how the market has changed, I think there's a much renewed attention and focus on how to really streamline your financial forecasting process. Not for, making something work out on a spreadsheet, right? Or getting your asset management to approve it, but, how are we actually going to get the returns, right, that we're promising LPs, investors. And I think the biggest piece is going to be, how do we actually get the teams to align on those goals, in case things change, how can they actually go and execute on those plans? And so I think, what's great about kind of the things that we're working on is, I think people have just more energy and thinking about what their budget assumptions are going to be and how they can actually go and execute on those plans.
I love that. You just talked about more energy. You're bringing them more in front of the customer with more fun experiences instead of clicking and closing the Excel file to greet a customer. Yes. In some cases. You mentioned teams. Talk to me about how you built this and for what teams, because you have the asset manager, right? You've got the regional manager. You have the on-site teams, right? You have the executives. All these different viewpoints that come into how they make decisions from this data, how that data gets in, all those things. And I've heard you say decision intelligence. So take me through how this shapes up for these these customers, I guess.
Yeah, maybe I can take a step back and maybe how we even started
Yeah, that's
Visibly.
great.
I remember it was April 2020, right at the height of the pandemic, and none of the revenue management, numbers are making any sense, and
Hmm.
we're making these just really large decisions as to what our targets need to be for, rent growth, for occupancy, right, for our renewal strategy. And I remember back then we just didn't have a simple, clean way to aggregate data and then figure out where are we going to be heading for GPR, next month or next quarter. And I remember thinking that that was just a really, strange place to be. We were very well resourced. We had 30,000 units, on the platform. And how is it that we can't, really predict, right, where we're going to end up, for NOI, right, in the next quarter. And so really thought that we had to change that whole dynamic by having a renewed attention on, the budgeting and forecasting process. Now, the thing that, has always driven us has been making software that's just very simple to use. My co-founder, Ryan, his mom was a property manager, and
Mm,
he remembers that when she had to do, financial reporting and operational
yeah,
analysis, she was just very overwhelmed, right, with having to do all of these, manual tasks, right, and sometimes, we see a disconnect between the skill set that we traditionally hire for, and then what the reporting requirements need to be, right, to be able to convince an
right.
asset manager to approve your budget. So the deal was that when we made Visibly, we had to make it so easy that even Ryan's mom can use it. And so we've got a little internal hashtag Ryan's mom, at the
Yeah.
company that really kind of helps us think about how can we be really empathetic towards what the on-site teams actually have to do to get the returns, and in a way that doesn't overwhelm them.
I love that, and that's been a guiding on the product design. Having that, and I'm sure that helps companies as they bring new employees inside organizations. Is this something that they have to move away from a process they already have, or can they step into a product like this?
For what do you mean?
For your product, is there a lot of change that's required, or is it just adding in a new process and then they move away from an old process or an old workflow?
Yeah, I think it really just depends on where you are, in the scale of your organization or how mature it is. Certainly, we've seen a lot of property management companies, through mergers and acquisitions, having to combine teams, right? Combine different processes together. By and large, what we see is that a lot of companies still rely on spreadsheets, on Excel, right, to be able to spin up these financial projections. And even on the operational reporting side, too, right? Like
Hmm.
you've got data that you're getting from Yardi. Everyone's got a Monday report that they have to collate together,
Right.
once a week. And so we're really trying to find a way to how do we streamline all of these different processes so that way if you're an asset manager, a regional manager, or just someone on site, that you can really evaluate your options for what are the strategic decisions that you can make, today. And it's been actually pretty interesting talking to just folks like at this last executive conference that we went to in Vail, where they talked about, a renewed attention on making sure that on-site team members have things like, critical thinking skills or more financial and business acumen. And some of them are even thinking about changing their whole, hiring practices altogether, right? Like we hear a lot about centralization and,
Hmm.
potentially what that skill set might be for, moving, right, folks from on-site into sort of centralized offices for leasing, for maintenance. And certainly that's one approach. We can, upend the whole way in which we've done, our traditional hiring practices or what kind of skills we think are valuable in multifamily. But we think that we also have, a responsibility as a technology provider to help them with the tools, to just up level their skill set. We're really trying to figure out, hey, how can we make technology and software that will make, anyone on the team as good as your best analyst? And, for folks that have, 5,000, 6,000 units and you don't have a huge IT team or you don't have a huge, financial planning and analysis team, how can we, democratize this data? How can we empower everyone to just be a great, critical thinker on site?
Yeah, the technology itself or the software, I guess, is making teams better. Is that what you're finding as they use it? There's tooltips and sort of access to data that otherwise wasn't packaged and presented in a way that's useful for decisions.
Yeah, I think it really comes in levels, right? I think everyone's trying to focus on making sure that your budget process is efficient. Certainly, that's version one of why you would want to use budgeting software or
Hmm.
companies like ours. Certainly time savings is something
Yep.
that you'd want to optimize for. But I think beyond that, it's really about how do we continue to test our assumptions, right? Your rent growth forecast, your renewal forecast. How is that actually playing out on site, right? right? And if the market's changing, how can you revise those assumptions to really get to the root cause of variances? And so, for us, we really try to think about the financial planning process holistically, right? Where you need a time where you can think about what your strategy is going to be for the year. But as things change, like you have to go and revise that strategy, right? And I think any organization that isn't, proactive about looking at the data and making decisions off of it, is going to be one that fall behind.
Yeah, and you've taken me through the demo and the actual product. It's beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
Is Ryan's mom also influencing the design, or is it?
Yeah,
I guess it's simple in that way, right?
We get a lot of feedback that people like the way that the product looks. I think for us, we really think about, how to meet people where they're at, and creating technology that folks want to use and aren't inundated, by all this information the way that we might see it in, legacy like BI solutions,
Sure.
right? Or different other providers. I think really brings the appeal and really helps connect the dots, between what you're seeing in the data and the actual decision making.
Yeah, and you mentioned streamline a few times, and let me take that back to those different roles because the information's different for each role. The asset manager, the executive, you have the regional, maybe the regionals, overseeing employee turnover, and this is to them it's a retention tool in some ways because they can broaden their reach of who can work within the organization because the technology is doing a little bit more lift on the process. Um, how do you see that streamline benefiting each one of those roles, if it be the executive, you mentioned forecasting, the regional, and then, of course, the on-site managers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now it seems because the deal flow is down, right? And everyone has to do the most with what they have. I think that plays out also just with how you manage people. Sometimes when
Yeah.
we work with companies, it's like the people who run the budget process. That's the president, that's the VP of operations,
Right.
because they don't have, folks like me, right, to run that process. And so we really find that our technology really helps optimize their time because you don't want the president, in charge of financial modeling at the company, right? Like
Right.
they have to have a higher view, right, of what is going on with the real estate and bring in that expertise. And at the same time, you need all the local input, right? I can't know every permit, every little expense that's happening on site. So we're really seeing, different use cases for both like the executives, but also for the on-site teams that, might be new to financial modeling and financial analysis, and the tools and the interface really helps bring those two pieces together.
Yeah. Can you take us through more of this feature? And I'm sure people are going to just want to get on a call with you, and I know some of this is interactive, and you want to have a one-to-one conversation or demo with that stuff. But can you take us through what's available in some of the features that you've put together here?
Yeah, I mean, the big piece is data integration, right?
Mhm.
There's so much information that you need to get out of a property management system to really be able to run a well thought out budgeting process
Mhm.
from your lease transactions, your trade outs, right? Your historical occupancy,
Right.
all of that is fundamental for, building a good projection because it tells you where you've been at, right? But
Okay.
it's also important to, and that's actually just a really huge lift, right? If you don't have software that helps you with it, you're collating, tons of reports, right? 20, 30 reports, aggregating that for the portfolio.
Right.
And so that creates just a lot of work, I think, for on-site teams. That we do in the back end, right? And so that way when we onboard, your data is ready to be used. And then the second piece is you kind of need power tools, right? Like if you're managing this at scale, I remember we're going to like the end of budget season and suddenly it's like we don't have enough cash flow for every CapEx project and you got to delete things, right? You have to cut things out. You need power tools that help you, with just a couple of clicks, be able to remove all of the expenses that you don't want in your budget projection,
Mm.
for example. And so that helps just save a lot of time. And I think what we're trying to conserve is just that brain power, right? That energy that you need to focus on your plan and not have to wait, right, for all these reports or like consolidations, right,
Yeah.
before you're able to make a decision.
And do you feel that this, I mean, obviously large scale operators can use this, but also do you think, this truly gives the maximum lift to a company that doesn't have a Bryant on their team as an analyst? I mean, is that
That's the goal. Yeah, that's the goal. That can one
be an
person.
enterprise national real estate operator?
That's right.
That
Yeah.
also.
I mean, I think that's certainly the goal, right? For one person, two people, right, to be able to run a budget process at scale, right? I mean, I was running it for 150 properties, and so we designed the software so that I'd be the one that could, potentially write the whole budgets if we needed to, right? But I think best practices is still getting your organization involved, right? There's so many different folks that need to, provide inputs into your projections. Your operations teams need to tell you what's going on at the ground for how you can build reasonable basis, right, into expenses, rent growth forecast, things like that. Asset management teams bring in, right, a higher level market study, right? They can set goals, right, and things that you want to achieve because they're more in tune with, hey, are we going to refinance next year, or is this going to be something that we position for a sale, or like what are the cash flow needs of the portfolio? And then you've got your accounting team, right, that has to do all kinds of depreciation, corporate expenses you have to
Yeah.
build in. So there could be quite a lot of steps, and that's why you need tools that are just very flexible so that they can really be tailor made kind of for your specific process, because not everyone's going to have a million department heads that want to weigh in. Some people just will have, limited resources, and that's where the software really shines.
Yeah, let me dive back into your background in you mentioned 150 properties, analyzing all those deals. Where did you get stuck and how did that impact what you built?
Yeah, where did I get stuck? That's a really great question. I mean, a lot of my time and energy was spent aggregating data, and as I reflect back just on that experience, it's just like what a waste of time. Like
Yeah.
my day to day was revenue management, to be really the expert on what's going on with leasing trends, with the market, right, with what's going on with occupancy, which floor plans are moving, right, like how is that going to impact kind of our overall strategy, how are we going to meet pro formas. And when that time is spent on manual tasks like just spinning up a financial model, that's just a waste of resources, especially for someone like me. So I think we're trying to really try to leverage people's expertise so that they spend a lot less time on, all these manual tasks and more time actually thinking about what their strategy and business plan is going to be.
Yeah, and that's gonna. I mean, these types of decisions are big decisions too. I mean, multiple millions of dollars in small incremental changes in these portfolios. If you have brighter minds paying attention to those indices instead of moving data, copy paste, download, exporting, uploading, and all that mess that you spent your time doing. How are you? What are the on-site managers saying? Have you spent time with them after they're using the product? What's life like after the product?
Yeah, I mean they really like it, certainly, especially folks that it's maybe like their first time budgeting and they need a lot of hand holding. I think making tools that are just very easy to use. For example, we wrote all the calculators and functions just in plain English, so they can just read off the page. I want to set a targeted annual growth rate, for example. They just type it in and it magically appears. I think that really helps start leveling up those skill sets for on-site teams. Well, another use that we're starting to see is as folks go after budget season and they have to do things like financial reviews, because we've got so many just built-in analytics and analysis on what's going on at the GL level, at the accounts. We
Mhm.
find that folks like to just jump in and get the quick ratios per unit cost, how much of your budget remains. Those are just really helpful for getting the time to action a lot shorter.
And this help with the narrative, helping property managers communicate more of the exceptions and even the variances to on a monthly, because we have the monthly reporting.
Yeah.
That's a quarterly reporting, depending on how things are shaped up. Does it help them tell better stories about what occurred? And
Yeah, that's right. So, every month we have to report on the root cause of our variances, but it can be pretty challenging when you've got your budget and your email version 4 draft,
right,
and you have to go find that. And then you've got all of your financial information right in your property management system. And so we developed a tool that basically brings those two things together. So that way on one page, you can see what the budget assumption was, what was your transaction history, and then we'll automatically look at, those insights to see how did my operational metrics that I planned for, how did those actually result, in my variance today.
yeah, our industry and really every other industry has seen a lot of innovation. It starts with marketing, then gets into operations, and then here comes financial. And financial innovation is becoming more and more interesting
Mhm.
to create those efficiencies and productivity and profitability inside organizations. And so, my question to you is, as products come to market like yours, what are the questions people should be asking you in order for them to identify what they should be purchasing, what should they be bringing inside to their organization. Because I'd be curious to see like what your category is. What is it? Is it decision intelligence? Is it a budgeting? I mean, does these many things, and I'm sure you have a vision for a big and expansive future. But what are the questions these operators should be asking when they're having conversations with you and other organizations?
Yeah, you mean like internally or?
Yeah, like how do you identify a tool like this?
Mhm.
If they've never bought this or a tool like this, if it's never existed for them, how should they think through that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think operators today that, have to scale organizations, right, and are maybe acquiring a lot of properties, I think should really think critically about, what are the systems in place that are going to allow them to be able to forecast performance and then be able to execute on those plans. Because if you don't have a plan in place today, right, then these problems get really big. Like I remember when I was at Steadfast, we had 5,000 units. They asked me to put together a financial model, and I was the Excel guy, so of course I'll put it together. But you add a couple of acquisitions, you add 3 years later, and suddenly it's just too much, for one person to do. So I think folks that are really thinking about what are the systems in place that will allow them to scale, or if they've got a big acquisition strategy coming up, those are folks that we'd love to talk to.
Yeah, I think about these types of tools. What did you call them? Well, I think you called them tools, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Hmm.
uh, I think about even when you get into the productivity conversation, just even more effective meetings. Just having better data um, leading into meetings, right? Getting the most out of the teams as they collaborate, they work together, so departments understand what's happening. I think about those tools. Um,
Yeah, and I guess to talk about that, what we see a lot is that, and as I reflect on my experience, we had a lot of point solutions that will optimize all different pieces of the business, right? You've got revenue management for pricing. Now you've got, AI leasing chatbots, right, that will help optimize your traffic, right, and like your responses to different leads. And there's really kind of no real way to sort of take a high level overview of, what are the goals I'm trying to accomplish in the next 90 days, and how do all those pieces, fit into my overall performance strategy. And certainly like a budget's important, right? Because one, we have to provide it, to asset management as just part of the management agreement. But I think we're gonna find, or we're finding today, just more traction, just and interest, and folks that want to, take operations to the next level is gonna be in how can I get really tactical over these next 90 days? Like what are the actual operational levers that I can pull today that will impact things like my rent growth, my occupancy, things like that. Because I think if you just sort of rely on the micro optimizations of all these processes, it can be pretty challenging to just see the forest through the trees, right? In a
yeah.
sense, and like where are we actually heading from a financial performance standpoint? And so that's really the tools that we're super excited about building. We call it the Decision Hub, where we're able to really forecast, hey, if I change my renewal strategy, what does that mean for occupancy, and what are the best practices around managing that?
And so that brings me back to what you mentioned, which was decision intelligence. And sometimes these budgets get set, they get dusty in a drawer, and then they're just like, well, that's the budget,
Mhm.
and it sits there until it's put together again,
Yep.
assembled, and all that time to do it. And I like what you just said there because I always said a budget is never an authorization to spend money.
Mhm.
And if you can take, and an asset manager is, looking at a capital event or a liquidity event, in some case an exit or a refinance, and they have certain specific goals they want to achieve. This could be a great tool to say, all right, here's where we need to go, and then create some real actionable decisions off of what to do next to achieve that. Am I
That's right.
incorrect on
And
that?
I
Or?
mean, you are in asset
Yeah.
management. You know that when you're making a decision on the future of a deal, right, of an investment, like time is of the essence, right? These things
Mhm.
can close pretty fast, right? And you
Yeah.
need to have a decision right away. And spending all this time on spreadsheets or building up these models can just be really a big waste of time. And so
Yeah.
we really want to shorten that time frame.
And so even for myself right now, I'm looking at an 800 unit development, and you're looking at a new, a different not a stabilized pro forma, a lease up one. How does this shape up, or how are you thinking through this with different asset classes, if it be affordable, tax credit, and these types of scenarios? Have you Are you factoring that in? Is that more of that customization that you're talking about, depending on how the portfolios are structured?
Yeah, I mean, right now what we're finding is that, everyone's got a different way to model something like revenue, for example,
Hmm.
right? And so we're not especially dogmatic about the way that we approach it. We know that there's going to be just different flavors and preferences, tailored to different asset classes. Right now we're focused on conventional multifamily. We know that pretty well,
Hmm.
but certainly our customers are taking us, towards lease ups. We find the similar issues in other asset classes like in affordable housing. We've heard of, the similar pain points in manufactured housing. I think there's a big opportunity here for all real estate to get on these systems.
Yeah, and getting on these systems, what makes you excited? I mean, you obviously had experienced a lot of um, exposure to the opportunities, the challenges, and created a product to solve for that. What are you excited about?
I'm really excited about just seeing how we can actually up level the skills of our team members. I spent about 4 years in due diligence and acquisitions. I got to fly all over the country, and as someone who grew up in California, I never thought I'd go to, Louisville, Kentucky, for example. And,
Right.
and I remember just during that experience, just really getting to see, who are the on-site associates that live at these communities, right? What are the residents like that live in our communities? And I think that just gave me just a lot of empathy for the kind of folks that we're trying to serve.
Mhm.
Certainly, we're here to help multifamily owners, investors, right, optimize the performance of their assets. But, as I think about just the high turnover that our industry, continuously talks about, right, 30, 40, 50% turnover in some of these communities, I think a big piece of this is that we're making their jobs hard. Like we're making their jobs just really challenging,
Mhm.
and the software and tools that they use just don't really serve them. So what gets me excited is about making things that our on-site teams are really going to love, and I think that's just going to pay dividends, upstream.
Yeah, and what happens after? Let's say somebody gets the software, they're onboarded. What happens after the sale? Like, how do you support customers differently? Because in many cases, they may not have a relationship like this in place, or they're using a tool that has something, but it doesn't really fully take the process. I mean, there's steps in place that can facilitate some budgeting, but it may not be a full system like you've developed. Um, how does that support look differently than maybe what they're experiencing now?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have, customer success folks that will help them, onboard and implement our software properly. What we bring to the table is just 10 years of multifamily experience doing this exact job, right? Not just forecasting performance, but also executing on these plans. And so I think what's been really great has been working with all just the different owners and companies to see what their strategies are in place, how we can help supplement some of their, analytical capabilities, right? With just best practice on how you would actually run a full scale, financial forecasting and analysis process. If you get to 30,000 units, great. But if you only got six, there's really best practices you can adopt today that will help you
Mm.
just be a lot more tactical.
And reaching out, like who this is a product that serves, really all multifamily owners and operators. What can they expect, I guess, in the decision process? How long does this take to get on into the organization? Um, the sales journey, the due diligence process. I'm sure you meet with teams and show them how this all works. But what's the realistic timeline of deploying something like this? I mean, we're coming up at a time where maybe people would be thinking about this.
Yeah, it takes us about 60 days, right, to get all the
Mhm.
plumbing correct, from
Yep.
the data integrations and getting everything set up. And then, we certainly have training available, right, for team members. Last year, it was really fun to go to all of their budget boot camps and
Mm,
meet the team members and really hear from them what are the things that make a difference, for their individual kind of properties.
yeah.
So we provide all that kind of support so that you can roll out a great budgeting process.
Yeah, that's great. And talk to me about, is this something that they can pilot or try on one property? Is it a portfolio decision? Like, how does that look?
So usually for the customers that we work with, it can be pretty challenging to swap your budgeting process year after year
Hmm.
because this really is a change management process where you want to get your organization involved, right, in the decision and how you're actually going to put together all of these assumptions together. So we tend to not do like a pilot on one property, though if folks want to do that, they
Okay.
certainly could. But I think the biggest value is going to be in thinking critically about your organization's, performance forecasting needs and doing, portfolio wide implementations.
Yeah, and sometimes people go into the decisions with either expectations or in some cases fears, right? Like, how's this going to go and all that stuff. Are there things that people are telling you that were kind of the aha moments? Like, man, that took a lot. That was a lot easier than I expected, or things that after they became a customer that you saw was really useful in that experience.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been really great has been seeing how people are able to maximize, a budget boot camp, for example.
Mm.
Folks, right, come together, they spend 3 days on their budget and watching all that collaboration, amongst them and working in the tool concurrently. You don't have to check anything out or like press save, it just auto saves. That's been
Uh-huh.
just really great with running just a really great budget boot camp. So I think folks that, are doing a budget planning process today and are planning for that, I think they're going to be able to get a lot of value from the employees, once they actually start the budget process.
Yeah, and your thought leadership on this topic is important, and I want to continually uh, share the time because your perspective is going to go far beyond what we do here today. Because I know that this is we're in the business of wealth management, right? And to your point early on, like if we don't have the right tools to predict where those things, what those investments achieve, or at least it's a little less friction and a little less cumbersome to make those predictions. Life gets better. Um, what what um, what do you see the future? I guess, and I'm not making you make predictions, but like, what do you see on the roadmap to where a product like yours can
Yeah.
solve for?
I mean, just to go back to your question, like on the ownership side, that part's pretty interesting to me, right? Because, basically what we're seeing is that, sometimes asset managers don't fully trust all of the decisions that property managers are doing on the ground, right? And you're making, like you said, right, a $50, rent bump decision, could mean tens of millions of dollars in portfolio value. So it's really important, I think, to get the asset management organization, aligned with the property manager, regardless of whether you're third party managed or asset managed, right, or owner managed. So I think what we're seeing a lot with owners is, they want to just have more confidence, right, that folks on the ground are making the right kinds of decisions that will, maximize portfolio value or take advantage of different opportunities. Or in this case, for this year, it's going to be about cutting expenses, holding on to rents as much as possible, right? So
Hmm.
when data siloed, right, when one organization is working in one system and then the owners are just sort of receiving these reports, 30 days later, I
Right.
think that just leads to a lot of friction internally, right, and can be the cause of, lost business if you're in a third party, scenario. So I think, in terms of predicting the future, I would love to see just more alignment, between ownership and property management so that they can all be on the same page. There could be avenues for them to be able to communicate strategy. And how do we actually convert that into, tangible goals that on-site team members can execute on today or the next, several weeks, for
Yeah.
example?
So the investment returns and yields become the outcome to those actions, and if you have the right tools and visibility to map those out, even on 90-day sprints, makes your ability to generate those yields even far more probable.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. All outcomes depend on processes, right? You're only as good as the processes that you have in there, and certainly some things you can't predict. No one could predict the eviction moratorium or
Right.
all the things that happened a few years ago. But I think folks that focus a lot on process, on looking at data, on communicating strategies with their teams, those are folks that I think will build just long-term competitive advantages, in the long term.
Yeah, and I like that when they spend time with you and your team, they may not be that 30,000 unit portfolio. They may have, 2,900 units or 7,200, and they may benefit from some of those best practices because you're bringing those into the it's sort of like an enterprise technology into maybe a company that doesn't have those workplaces or workflows in place.
Yeah, and by the way, spinning up a full service, financial planning and analysis team, at the corporate office is also just tremendously expensive.
Hmm.
I just think about how challenging it is to, hire folks on site, how to recruit great talent, in your organization. We think that having tools like ours in the long term will help save on, things like full-time employees as you're able to do more with a lot less folks on the corporate side.
Yeah. What's been the best lesson you've learned by going through this process? I mean, you lived through it now. Now you have to go and communicate the value of it. That's always challenging. But what's been the best aha moment for you so far?
The best part has been talking to just the community of multifamily executives.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a different strategy, a different story, different ways that they finance the deals. And all of that shapes their operating strategy, right? Everyone's got a different, competitive advantage of what they know in the market, what kind of teams they've assembled. And so I think just meeting the talent that exists today makes me just really excited about the technology that we're building for them.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch. As we go through this, more and more companies I think are going to be using more modern tools to understand this, and it becomes the differentiator because talent's your last real competitive advantage. And if you can get them out of the weeds doing the things that are not so fun, redundant, and that's where errors occur, right? I mean, changing Excel sheet, formulas can be problematic, painful in an assumption that's in place. When you have a PPM that goes out 10 years, your software provides a little bit of structure to that process. So
And the retention piece is interesting to me because I just think that when we make work, frustrating and tedious, it just pushes away great talent, that could
hmm
really serve you for years to come in your organization,
right,
today we compete, right, with other industries. Like there's private equity, there's finance, right?
right,
There's the real estate industry. You're really working for folks that really want to, you're really looking for folks that want to work at your organization. Like I face
right.
this today as we hired, different engineering talent, right? The folks that actually build the software and how disadvantaged in some ways, if you're a multifamily company who wants to build your internal development team, it's so expensive and challenging just to even attract that talent. And I think that that same analogy plays out on site at the corporate office, with all these different team members.
Yeah, no, I love your vision. I love how big it is in terms of the understanding the purpose of the business unit. It isn't built. It isn't for the technology. It's for the people.
Yeah.
And they're growing up using technology that's very familiar, modern, and easy to use. It makes sense to have that when they get to work.
Yeah, those are really great trends on Zoomers and the things that they
Yeah,
care about. I think certainly as they enter the workforce, technology will have to adapt, to their preferences.
yeah. What before we wrap up here, I'm going to give you another final thoughts question to answer. But how do people get in touch with you? Products ready
Yep.
to serve the market?
That's right. Yeah. So you can go to visibly.io. Yeah. You can book a demo there or you can find me on LinkedIn, Brian Carcamo.
Awesome. And we'll put all the links to that in the show notes. You can get that at multifamilyinnovation.com under the podcast. Give us any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with, or answer any questions I should have asked that I didn't ask.
Yeah, we're really looking to serve multifamily executives and operators who want to take operations to the next level. We think that now is a perfect time to really think about how you actually execute on your financial goals and what are sort of the tech stack that allows you to do that. We're building a lot of just innovative software that hasn't existed before that really spells out your strategic decisions. How can you go and take your renewal strategy? How does that translate into financial performance? And so for folks that are interested in that conversation, we'd love to chat with them.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on. We'll continually be following what you're working on, exciting stuff, and we'll see you in the next show.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Listen, if you want to follow along what we're working on with Multifamily Innovation, go to multifamilyinnovation.com, subscribe, rate, and review this show, and we'll see you in the next episode. See you guys.